Say the bracha.
Praised are you, Adonai, our God, King of the universe, who gives the Torah of truth and the good news of salvation to your people Israel and to all the people through Yeshua the Messiah, Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Alright. So last week we got stuck on some rainbows. Yes?
Yes. 42.
42 of them exactly. Okay. So what we're going to continue doing is looking at covenants from a kingdom perspective, and we're going to try and find the thread or the links that tie up between what God is establishing on earth, and we've got these foreshadows of things of what's going to come, right? So with Noah, we see that he wants to establish his Messiah on earth through the dove and the olive branch. We see that there are going to be 3 sets of 14 in the generations that are going to come, which are going to give us 42. And we see that he is about establishing what is in heaven here. So a sign of a rainbow between light and water. Okay? And that light and that dove talks about that creation. Now if we're going to follow that same logic and just kind of plant that in the back of your mind, we're going to take a look at the next person who gets a massive covenant from God. Who's the next guy? Right, Abraham. Okay, now do me a favor quickly. No, we're not going to that. Alright, I was going to take you to Genesis 10 before we find this microphone. I was going to get good.
No, you didn't.
Alright. Okay, so where are we going to find the story of Abraham? Who is Abraham?
Man from Chaldea.
Alright, we're going to look. You've got 3 scriptures when we deal with Abraham. Okay? All in Bereshit. We've got Genesis 12. We've got Genesis 15. And we've got Genesis 17. Okay? So when we start looking at a specific covenant with Abraham, God reiterates it not just in one space like he does with Noah. He promises, he establishes, and he further promises in 3 different portions. Now that's kind of interesting because when you look at it, it's a promise, and then it's, don't worry, it's going to come, don't worry, it's going to come, and then it gets established. Okay? So one of the first things you're going to notice, and sometimes we don't notice, so I'm going to make you aware of this, is there's quite a big time frame gap between the promise, the reiteration, and the fulfillment. Okay? To give you, to just kick you off. Abraham comes from where?
The city of Ur, the Chaldeans.
Okay, Ur, Chaldean. Okay? Now remember, we saw that number that we made a reference to has the same gematria as 42. Okay, so Chaldea comes in, God's already making a link. Don't panic. Okay, and he's linking Chaldea to the next covenant. Okay? So as he gets called out, leave what you know behind and come walk with me, come spend some time with me, I'm going to show you something. And he sort of does a similar picture with Noah, except Noah's come spend time with me was on a boat, and he went on a little cruise for a while. Except he didn't, well he did kind of in a way, he had to leave some people behind. Abraham has to do the same thing. He has to let go of his normal life, he has to let go of everything he understands, and then he has to go on a walk with God. Alright? This is going to become an interesting foreshadow for a few things. Okay? As Moses left as Abraham left everything that he understood, and he walked with God, it becomes a later picture of Israel leaving Egypt and walking with God. Both have promises attached, both have inheritance attached, and then later when discipleship happens, he says, Lech Acharai, they leave everything that they know and that they understand, and then they go and walk with God again. Because there's a future inheritance that's still coming. Okay, so it becomes an interesting foreshadow of how God is trying to get us to walk away from where He found you. Okay? Most of these established covenants, when we look at them, where God finds them, they're normally stuck in a place they shouldn't be. Whether through just family sitting in a situation, whether through slavery, and that hits us right between the eyes, because normally when God picked us up out of where we were probably in a place we shouldn't be. Okay? Leave that life behind and come and walk with me.
Abraham or Abraham before that was an idolater. Right?
Well, it says he grew up in a house of full of idols, and the only other sort of indication of what was going on there, well, you'd have to look to the Talmudic writings for that. Okay, and with everything, just be a little bit cautious. His father apparently was an idol maker, and then they go through this whole story. There must be more, and then he tests to see if God is real, and God answers him by making the idols fall over and things like that. So let's stick to what we have in context. What we do is we find him in a household full of idols. How many generations has passed since Noah?
3, 4, 14. Noah's still alive.
Yeah, no. I'm just talking about sons. How many generations? Well, you guys want to look in the Bible. It says open book test. Alright? Feel free to open up the Bible. Genesis 10. Well, where did you get yours? Alright.
Good. Yes, Shem.
Alright. So Shawnee's going to help you out. And she says if you look at Genesis 11.
10.
Okay.
Shem is on Hashem.
How many? Yeah.
It's the 10.
Okay, so we're looking at 10. So roughly 10 generations. Okay, the fact that they live really long makes it difficult because we start to understand when we overlap the names and how long these guys lived for, and when these other guys were born, we probably realize that either just before or at the time of Noah, Abraham was born. So he could have very well have heard the story of the flood firsthand. So there I was on a boat. Yo, how old are you, Noah? It's like, old. And he very well could have been sitting there listening to it from his father, probably heard it firsthand, or Abraham himself heard it firsthand, and then maybe there's a little bit more to this backdrop story. Simple fact of the matter is, I can't tell you for sure that Abraham sat on Noah's lap and he got told about the flood. What I do know is, we have 10 generations. So we have the number 42. That told us about Chaldea. Number 10, what does normally represent?
Covenants.
Covenants, generally, okay? Covenants. So if there's 10 generations, he's going to establish from one covenant to the next covenant. From a Noah to a Abraham. Remember, this is God's story. We kind of become so obsessed in where we are and what we're dealing with right now that we don't worry too much about the next generation and the generation after that and the generation after that. Not unless you physically know them and you're a great-grandparent, are you too concerned about where they are and what they're doing. 4 generations from now, how many of you have given much thought about what you're doing now to prepare 5 generations from now? Yeah, it hasn't even crossed our mind. We're still trying to figure out where we are, right? God is busy preparing even 10 generations. And we're going to see him carry on that same sort of theme in the covenantal promises before, where he links, which is going to go through Isaac, through Jacob, but he makes promises here to the nation of Israel that hasn't been born yet. Okay? So go to Genesis 12 for me quickly. Now Adonai said to Abraham, at that stage his name hasn't been changed, get yourself out of your country, away from your kinsmen, and away from your father's house, and go to the land I will show you. Notice, first faith action, statement. Leave, and then when you leave, I will show you a place. Okay, this is a little close to home for us here.
Where will we go?
Right? Because if God says, I'm going to send you, and you say, okay, Abba, I'm willing to go here, 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 and here. I'm willing to stay as long as this, and this. Or, and Abba goes, that's not how I operate. When I tell you to leave, you leave. Up until that point, prep time. He's getting you ready for what is needed. And what's needed is he's going to get as much in you as possible so that the people praying for truth, that when you go out with God and you give them God, not you. Amen? Investing in you so that you can give them and show them truth. This is about people crying out to Him saying, we want somebody to show us how this is done. We want someone to explain this book. We want someone to teach us about Messiah. This is not about nationality. This is not about comfort. This is about the kingdom of God. If you're a kingdom servant, and we have to get people into the kingdom, you as a servant might get sent out like a shlichim, an emissary, so that you may help those who don't know Him. And He might just use whatever He needs to, political unrest, to get you to consider living where you are now. God has an agenda. Sometimes we need a push. Okay? So He says, I'm going to show you this place. Get out and start moving. I will make of you a great nation. I will bless you and I will make your name great, and you are to be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse anyone who curses you, and by you all the families of the earth will be blessed. Okay? So, what's the first thing that God promises Abraham about? No.
I will show you a land.
Yes, there's going to be a land involved. Alright. Then, what do these promises then come into? I'm going to?
Like a great nation.
Okay, so you're going to become a great nation.
I will bless you.
Right? Important. Is blessing involved? And remember, blessing equals?
Obedience.
Whatever draws me closer to. With obedience comes blessing. But that's because I understand my source. If I walk with God and I see the fruit that comes from it, that brings blessing. Not only for me, but for the people around me. Okay? They get to see a relationship being walked out with God. And then I can bring that relationship that I have, that God has cultivated over time, and I can walk into a place, God willing, I get to a point where I can hear from Him, I can distinguish between what is Him and what's not of Him, and I know I am about His business and what that means. So that when someone comes up to me and says, what is this about? I can immediately take everything He's taught me and I can look at the text and I can go, this is the bigger picture, this is the right now picture, and this is what He's trying to show you. And we start to operate from a kingdom perspective. Okay? So He brings blessing, and that blessing is a relationship with God. So I'm going to just put that there so we don't forget it. It's not about your comfort. It's not about your money. Get that out of your brain. Next.
Name great.
Okay? So we're going to have a great name.
Good.
Next.
Good the door.
Shukador. What else?
Good.
And then it's going to bless you again.
Good.
Alright.
You shall be a blessing.
Okay. You, well, this is, so
That's input.
God and Abe are going to be in relationship. You, in this relationship, will show God. And because you show God, everyone will be blessed. And in that, it's a side addendum, how will all the nations of the earth be blessed?
Messiah.
Right. We need to understand there's twofold thing here. Messiah comes in two different forms for us. Number one,
The servant.
let's get just plain sense. It's the Word. Because Abraham was obedient and Abraham had a relationship with God, and someone recorded all the things that Abraham did and experienced, I then can read about God through Abraham's eyes. And I can read about Abraham through God's eyes. And because of that, this very thing gets ingrained in the bigger story about the kingdom of heaven and what God is going to establish. Okay? So through this lineage, eventually there's going to be a guy called Moshe and a mountaintop moment and a recording of everything from the beginning. And everyone in the world will know there is a God, the creator of everything.
Amen.
And because of that, we see Torah become flesh in the guise of Yeshua, who will then save us, because we understand that we need saving. You guys with me so far? Okay? So, any other blessings you see there? Have we covered more or less? Okay, happy days. So that's it. That's the entire Abrahamic covenant, except we've got some problems. What problems do we have?
Where's the sign?
Okay, we have no sign, we have no stipulations, and nothing has been cut.
And he has not a Hebrew yet. He hasn't crossed over.
No, these are promises leading up to the cutting of the covenant. But before we get to the place where you can enter into covenant, you've got to understand whom you're serving. Fast forward to Passover. All the miracles, the signs and wonders, the plagues were all a build-up to show Egypt, to show Pharaoh, to show the Hebrews, and show the world who is God. How can you enter into a covenant with someone you don't know? How are you going to understand him? How are you going to walk with him? How are you going to understand why he is trying, what he's trying to establish? Why is he trying to establish? We get the opportunity, and we can sort of parallel this with us. Yeshua died for you, yes? Whether you believed in him or not, he still died for you. This is what I did to get you here. I saved the nation of Israel. I brought them into a mountain, and then I say, now, how about you and me? You see, you get a privilege because you are saved. Because you are saved, you can enter into covenant. And you have this opportunity to walk with God in relationship because of your salvation. And because of our salvation, we follow in obedience because we understand that He loves us more than we ever loved ourselves. That He knows more about us and about where we are and about where we're supposed to be more than we ever will. So we trust Him. And we walk with Him. And we see through this lesson of discipleship, of growth, that we will eventually get to where He needs us to be, not where we want to be. You with me? Okay. So we get these promises and he's going, all right, this is what I'm going to do. And Abraham's blown away and he's all excited. And we see some things happen. What happens to Abraham? Okay, he leaves. And who does he take?
Lot.
Okay, he takes Lot and he his wife. What else happens to him?
Just before that, he lost his dad on the way down as well.
Alright, I'm just looking for highlight reel. What I want to do is give you some sort of chronology.
Lost to
Egypt.
She was barren, Sarah.
We're going to get that, right? We find out later in the story that they don't have kids.
Entered Canaan.
Verse 6, Abraham passed through the land to a place called Shechem in the Oak of Moreh. Shechem comes back later with the Israelites with Gerizim and Ebal. The Canaanites were in that land. Adonai appeared to Abraham and said, to your descendants, to your seed.
But Moreh
Literally.
is teach, doesn't it?
Yeah. I will give this land. So he built an altar there to Adonai, who had appeared to him. So, to your seed, I will give this land. So he reiterates the first problem, and who belongs to the land? The seed. The inheritance belongs to the seed of Abraham. Is that plural or singular? Later on, your gospel writers will, not your gospel writers, your epistle writers will make a play on that word, saying that seed is Yeshua. The inheritance belongs to him. And as-
He has made us kings and priests.
And as we walk with him, it becomes our inheritance, in a sense, because who's our inheritance?
Yeshua.
Yeshua.
So it's the same, almost the same promise that he made to the Levites, that their inheritance will be Jehovah. But now our inheritance is Yeshua, and Isaiah 12:2 says Jehovah became Yeshua.
It's the same picture. He says, don't worry about the land here. This is not what you're aiming for, guys. It's not that you're going to find a piece of plot and a nice house and this is going to be the be-all and end-all of your existence. It's not about this physical stuff. The inheritance is kingdom-minded. One day, hopefully long time from when, after you're gone, someone is probably going to have to break down and rebuild your house because it was falling apart anyway. It's not about the stuff you have here. You're going to leave all that stuff behind. If I spend all my life fighting for the physical, I'm going to miss the heavenly. Okay? We have to understand that that stuff is just stuff. It's about function. A house is there so that you have a place to sleep, that you're sheltered from the cold and the heat and the rain. That's all it's there for. It is not there to define who you are. You know, it's funny in this day and age, according to your street address, tells me exactly what type of person you are, apparently. Oh, so you stay on the East Rand, do you? Say no more. We don't have to have any more conversations, because I know what type of people you are. And that flips over on the other side. How many of you have thought of people who stay in the north? Yeah, and immediately you're like, oh, is it? You're from the north, do you? Means nothing. You're thinking about it from a normal worldly perspective. Should you be asking, are they godly? Is that not the thing that should define them? Doesn't matter how much money you have and how much money you don't have. It's whether you have God or not. That's the difference. Abraham will later be blessed out of his socks and he will have loads of money, but he had God. The disciples will go out and they will have no money. They had God. He used them both mightily. You have have what you have. Sorry, you have what you have because that's what God wants you to use for the kingdom. If you don't like it, you are not questioning, let me say this lovingly. If you're grumbling about where you are financially or grumbling about what you have or what you don't have, you're questioning God's love.
And his ability.
Be careful. Guys, sometimes He has to put you in the wilderness just so that He can teach you that He can provide. Sometimes He has to put you in the wilderness so that you will stop looking at your gold and your jewels and start looking at Him instead. If you do not have those wilderness moments, you will get lost to the world.
So he said to us, in spite of myself,
Baruch Hashem.
that God.
But God. So wherever you are right now, and whatever you're dealing with right now, remember, the difference between success and defeat is one statement. And this is not the way the Israelites made that statement, but with a true heart condition. Abba, are you still with me? And if He's still with you, you have nothing to fear. Okay? Someone obviously needed that. So he goes up and he builds an altar there. And verse 8, he left that place and he went to the hill of the east of Bethel and he pitched his tent at Bethel to the west and Ai to the east. And he built an altar there and he called on the name of Adonai Yehovah. Then Avram traveled on, continuing toward the Negev. But there was a famine in the land. So he went down to Egypt and he stayed there because of the famine in the land was severe. You will be blessed, you will be blessed, you will be blessed, and there's a famine, run for your life because God forgot you. That's the prosperity theologist's translation. Abraham obviously didn't pay his tithe. Therefore, he has nothing. You see, as soon as we get away from what this actually means, we have to cover God by creating theology. I will bless you. And blessing is, I will walk with you. I will be there by your side every minute, every hour of every day. And then there was a famine. Don't worry, Abe, we're going down to Egypt. There's food there. I planted it. They've got enough for us. Let's go. And if you're looking at it from a worldly perspective, you go, you see, God doesn't love me. He told me He would look after me, and I will refuse to move from where I am because He told me I will be blessed here. No, He said you will be blessed. There's a wonderful principle in this. Let me help you see this. Here's your provision. This is where you are. And God says, come, let's go. And you go, no, you don't love me, but I want provision. So you stay where you are, but you pray earnestly. But God's here with your provision. How am I going to get from here to there so that I can get my provision? Yeah, you walk. You don't sit and mumble.
Follow the plan.
Where He is, you will be taken care of. If you distance yourself, listen to me. When Israel went and He said, I'm going to take you to a land of milk and honey, they didn't stop and say, bring the milk and honey here. Until you prove yourself, I will not walk with you. He's like, I've proved myself 50 times already. Are you coming or not? But I have to go through the wilderness. Yeah, but don't worry, the provision's there. But it's going to take time. It might take years.
It's like a parent talking to the child. But yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
Why does God put the provision there and me here?
Because I've got to learn to walk in faith.
Right, because He's really hoping that before you get the provision, you change. We've said it time and time again, to get you out of Egypt is one thing, but to get Egypt out of you is the other. Get you into a fellowship, into a church, into a shul is one thing. To get the shul, the fellowship, the church in you is the other.
It's amazing that the word Egypt means bondage.
How do I get more God in than the world?
You've got to leave the world behind and make space for it.
Right. I have to continually be open to Him and not my own views, my own perceptions, my own issues. Guys, He wants to transform you, not destroy you. But He might have to break down a wall or two because He needs to make room. Let Him break down the walls, because you probably built those walls up to defend yourself from other things that hurt you. So what we do is we create distance. And when we create distance, where do we put God normally? Yeah, behind the wall with everybody else that hurt me. And He's going, why is your house 2 by 2? I told you to build it 24 by 24. We've got all these weird walls in the middle. I just don't understand. I was compartmentalizing. I was just making space so that I could control my little bubble. You see, Abraham had to leave all of his understanding, all of his comfort, everything he understood.
And he had to learn to make God the focal point of everything.
And he had to learn to wait.
And move into a tent too.
Tabernacle. It's a wonderful story. Anyway, he goes down to Egypt, and we know the story. He was about 75 years old at the time. His wife is about 65, 74, 65, somewhere around that time. And Pharaoh thinks this wonderful woman,
It's such an odd thing to think of.
I know, is absolutely
This old
stunning.
lady in the... Oh, that's a bit of a...
The thing is, we don't know back then how slow they age.
Yeah, no, remember, Abraham lived to be 175 at this time. So he's still got another 100 years to go. And she lived to 127, so she's maybe middle-aged. So let's give her the age of about 35, 40 instead of a 65-year-old, as we understand. She must have been. Because, you know, when the new people come into town and Pharaoh's sitting over there and the Pharaoh's advisor's going, have you seen the talent that came through door number 7? Like, you are going to be happy with what arrived in your city today.
And weren't Egyptians all about like face makeup and looking pretty and being plucked and all that stuff?
Well, they were more like being the bold was their thing. Eyebrows and everything left the building.
Wasn't that because they had an aversion and fear of hair because of lice or something?
Yeah, no, they thought it was dirty, so for them it was about sort of making their own evolutionary statement. We are so much better than those guys. But anyway, so he sees her and Abraham does something silly. He tells a half-truth, or a half-lie, depending on your version. He says, what does he tell her?
My sister.
My sister.
Okay, he's not wrong, it's half-sister.
It's a half-truth and a total lie.
Yeah, absolutely. So he says, do this, but why did he say that?
Fear for his life, stop trusting other life.
Right, because they're going to kill me to get to you. And isn't it funny that the very fear thing of getting to his wife, except to do that he would have to die, in his logic, and in Pharaoh's logic, I'll just take her, thanks. She doesn't belong to anybody. This thing plays out. And when he goes in, Abraham is safe. Who's protecting Sarah? So he protects himself, but he takes away his wife's protection. Who's the wife's protection? It's supposed to be the husband who's relying on God.
Because the husband is not only the head of the house, I'm supposed to love the wife with everything.
Right.
Same way Christ
You have a
did.
beautiful wife. Thank you. She's mine. This is the protection. She belongs to me. We're part of this covenant, and I'm standing behind an even bigger God. He's saying, it's my sister. And what I find fascinating about this story is in the midst of this covenantal blessings and this walking out, God has to deal with Abraham's fears. And he also has to deal with Sarah's faith. Why do you think Sarah's going to need faith?
Isn't she barren?
Because later, Hagar's going to have a child and we realize that Abraham was not the problem, Sarah was. Can an old lady have children?
Yes, the Guinness World Book of Record, lady of 63 gave birth.
Yeah, we're
Don't ask me how that worked.
we're talking about a much later age. But here we're dealing with this whole thing of, as I was with you to protect you from Pharaoh, who could protect anybody against Pharaoh? God can. And I'm going to protect you in the midst of it. And that should have built up when God, she probably cried out, she probably prayed, she probably was sitting there going, Abba, I belong to another man. And God had to have a little conversation with Pharaoh and says, excuse me, what are you doing? And how does he have that conversation? Something like that, but plagues hit the house. So to protect the bride, plagues came. Sound familiar? As God is preparing the way forward, He's giving you a shadow back here. And it was Pharaoh's fear in the next story that led him to be overthrown. Let us make them into slaves, lest they overthrow us. Your fear is going to become your reality. You're going to get overthrown anyway. You could have just let them go. Abraham, they're going to take you and they're going to kill me. Well, they took you anyway. Be careful what you're afraid of. Make sure that that fear is only holy reverence and respect for one who created spirit and body. The one whom you will answer to. Scriptures all over the place. When it talks about, Yeshua tells them, he says, rather worry about God, who can destroy both, than worry about men who can only destroy body. I'm with you. That's my job to worry about it. And they go through this whole process, and it's the same foreshadow. He comes up with plagues, except this time Pharaoh listens, and he's like, take her, get out, and go. And he gets thrown with gifts, and they leave Egypt, and he becomes ridiculously wealthy very quickly. Eh? Same story.
Favorably disposed.
And he leaves.
Paid to leave.
He gets paid. Yeah, I don't want you people, I don't want these plagues, I don't want any of this thing. He leaves.
But it was still in the midst of a great drought that he was told to leave.
Yeah,
And
but
he was blessed after that because he didn't die.
God is continually just showing them and dealing with them heart condition after heart condition after heart condition. I want to build your faith that I can protect you. I want to build you up. I want to show you that I can provide for you. I want to show you that I'm going to walk with you. I'm going to show you that my power does not stop when you move territory. I am the same God in Benoni as I am in Botswana or Netherlands or Israel or wherever He sends you. He's the same God. If you're asked to pray for someone while you're on a cruise ship, He's there. Water's not going to stop Him. Every step He's with you. How do I know that? Because He lovingly takes me through every step. Okay? And we go through time. And wouldn't it be really awkward right now if God said, this is the promise, you spent a couple of nights with Pharaoh, out comes a child. Whose baby is that?
That's exactly what I was thinking.
So He again prolongs the blessing for a time to make sure no one can make the statement that this God of the Hebrews or this promise was fulfilled through Pharaoh. It was Pharaoh, the great God, who brought forth the seed. No, it was not. When God says He's going to do it His way, He's going to do it. And if He says He's going to do it through you, He's going to do it. How and when that's going to happen is up to Him. And it's up to us to invest or lean into Him so that He gets us ready. Sometimes it takes time. Sometimes we are the ones that need to change. So it carries on. And the story carries on. What else do you see? Chapter 13, what's that about? Okay? There's some issues. There's a split. Lot goes down to stay by Sodom and Gomorrah. Why? Because it's lush and beautiful and it will be His provision. Abraham says, wherever God is will be my provision. He sees, his eyes are being opened to the faith and relationship that he had. Even in the midst of a difficult famine, even in the midst of Pharaoh himself, I was blessed, I was protected, and I came out with more. How does that work? Only God knows. I got it wrong and I still came out better than what I was when I went in. And here, Lot looks with the physical eyes, and Abraham says, it really doesn't matter. God is with me, it's fine. Chapter 14. What is chapter 14 about?
4 Kings verses 5.
Alright. 4 kings and 5 kings, and Lot getting picked up, and then a really interesting guy by the name of Melchizedek appears. Who's Melchizedek?
I suspect Shechem.
Of course, it's a loaded question. Alright, if you figured that out, we need to have a discussion. Alright, it says in the Psalms, well, let's stick before the Psalms, we get there. Melchizedek, what does the name mean?
King of righteousness.
King of righteousness, okay? And remember, the 4 kingdoms come down from the north, beat up the kings, the 5 kings, take everything, including Lot, and then they go off. Abraham says, Abba, I need your help, I need to go and fetch this guy. And he takes his 300 odd men and he goes up and he beats the snot out of the kings that have just conquered his entire region. And he comes back, and on his way back, you know, I find it funny, he has this little meeting with, not only with Melchizedek, but with the kings of, I think it was the king of Sodom and Gomorrah. See how the king of Sodom said to Avram, just after that in verse 21, says, give me the people and keep the goods for yourselves. You little snotcock, why weren't you fighting for your people? Another guy had to go and fetch his family. He cared more about his family than you cared about your subjects. When are we going to get to the place where we fight more for the people than we fight for anything else? But just before that, Melchizedek, king of Salem, Shalom, brought out bread and wine. Interesting. He was a Kohen of El Elyon, God Most High. Where do we see El Elyon pop up quite a bit? Daniel, right? And Daniel gives us the timeline and the foreshadowing of Mashiach, right? And when we see this guy pop up, we see bread and wine in his hand, and he comes with the King of Peace. Now remember, Jerusalem is made up of 2 words. Yireh, Shalom. Yireh, provide. Shalom, peace. God will provide peace. Okay? And at the same time, we can fast forward to Yeshua, and through bread and wine, through a Pesach offering and a marriage proposal, there is going to be peace. And he goes up and he says, blessed be Avram by El Elyon, maker of heaven and earth, and blessed be El Elyon, who handed your enemies over to you. Avram gave him 1/10 of everything. So, who's higher here? The one who receives 1/10 or the one who pays the 10th? Right? The one who receives it. Who was Abraham giving to?
Priest.
No.
To God.
To God. Important lesson. When you pay tithe, who do you give it to? You're giving it to God. Bottom line. How you give it is if, okay, let me not. God says, I love a cheerful giver. So when you pay your portion and you are blessing Abba for everything that He has given you, you can give it cheerfully to those who are supposed to represent Him. Now for the people who receive this, and I'm not trying to excuse the way it's been done in many places. This is not about building a 14,000 seat theatre. This is about building the people. You have the blessing of obeying a mitzvah. They have the blessing of receiving from God. If you put you or the person anywhere in that equation, you've missed the point. You are not giving to the pastor. You are not giving to the ministry. You are giving to the Father, who is then going to bless said ministry or feed said flock. That's it. It's not complicated. Do you know Yeshua's ministry was funded? It's only mentioned once in the Gospels.
The preaching.
Joanna, who was married to Chuza, who was the governor of an area, she took her husband's money and says, now that's a rabbi I can get behind. For Yeshua to be able to be a traveling rabbi, for him to be able to go from synagogue to synagogue, for him not to be a burden to one community but was funded by a person within the community, took the faithful obedience of one lady. If she didn't fund him, I'm sure God would have raised up someone else who did, but let's just say, for instance, it was never there. What would Yeshua have to do 5 days or 6 days a week? Work. How many people would he taught? Would he have been able to teach during that time? Very few. How many was he able to? It's because his needs were met. Do you think Abba has a special blessing for that lady? Absolutely. Guys, don't overcomplicate it. It's about God and about you. He's either your source or he's not. That's what we give to and that's what we do. We don't. And if we grumble, let's just say we've all been smacked at one point in our life when we go, I don't know when to give this to you. God loves a cheerful giver. Don't grumble. It's a blessing when you're able to perform a mitzvah. Okay? So, he goes up to chapter 15. Very quickly. What do you see in chapter 15?
A vision. Sometime later.
Yeah, I like this. Sometime later, you've been wandering around for a while. Adonai came to Avram in a vision. Don't be afraid, Avram. I am your protector. Your reward will be very great. So we get some extra little blessings here. Protection. Because of this, they will bring reward. Okay? Abraham replied, as any good Middle Eastern person will do.
Negotiate.
Yeah. He says, Adonai God, what good will your gifts be to me if I continue childless and Eliezer from Damasek inherits my possessions? Because you can bless me out of your socks, but if I die, then what? Who am I leaving this to? What's the point of all this wealth? How many of you have asked that question?
Solomon even asked that question.
You're just more worried about your own money and what you can do with it. What's the point of receiving blessing if you keep it? It blesses no one. The accumulation of wealth is something the world does best. If I take my wealth and I expand my table so more people eat, that's what God does best. Now let's just take that from the physical to the spiritual for a second. God gives you a ridiculous amount of teaching. He reveals things to you that people have never heard of or seen before. He opens up your eyes and He gets you to the next level. And then what do? If you keep it to yourself, what is the point? Everything you've been given is so that you can give to others. Every truth, every realization, every prayer answered is not only just to build you, to build the generation behind you. It is not about a ministry, it is not about your kingdom, it's about God's. We need to let go of our mindsets. You haven't given me a child, Abraham continued. So someone born in my house will be my heir, but the word of Adonai came to him, he said, this man will not be your heir. No, your heir will be a child from your own body. Then he brought him outside and said, look up into the sky and count the stars. If you can count them, your descendants will be that many. He believed in Adonai and he credited it to him as righteousness. So the next promise is the seed, sort of addendum, is going to come out of Abraham's body, a physical seed. Okay? From a physical lineage. And God, being God, hits them with something that He can understand. Go outside and count the stars. Now, we've done some research into this, and apparently some people were crazy enough to actually try this. No matter where you are in any part of the world on a clear night, you will not be able to count more than how many hundreds of thousands of stars? 600,000. When you look at the numbers and the censuses that take place in Scripture, when it talks about the sons of Israel, you will always get just over 600,000 men. I don't think Abraham sat and counted the stars.
I'm not sure that they had a number system that went that high then.
Some people worry more about the physical impact of where all these people would be. That's their only consistent problem, because the word in Hebrew can double up as tribes as well as people. Simple fact of the matter is, we have a practical illustration that God is trying to show us. Later He will tell him to look at the sand of the seashore, and he goes, count the grains. I really like beaches, but I've never ever got to that point. Right? All I know is that sand gets everywhere. Right? Funny enough, so do Israelites. Okay? And you have this interesting dynamic, and he says, all right, now that you understand this, he says, then he said to him, I am Adonai who brought you out from Ur the Chasdim to give you land as a possession. He replied, Adonai God, how am I to know that I will possess it? He answered him, bring me a 3-year-old cow, a 3-year-old female goat, a 3-year-old ram, a dove, and a young pigeon. Okay? What do we have? How many animals?
5.
Okay, so 5. We've got another number. What does 5 mean? Okay, 5 is about Torah. Torah is about establishing covenant. Okay, this is my story and this is what's going to happen. And he tells them to cut them from tail to snout, split them in two, and then you put them along the sides except the birds, and then the blood drains into the middle, and then what is supposed to happen is, I promise, as God is my witness, I will do this, this, and this, and if I don't, you can make me like these animals and I'll walk through the blood. And the person who enters in covenant as well would say the same thing, this is what I'm going to do, and I'll walk through the blood. That's the way it should have happened. Listen to what he says in verse 12. As the sun was about to set, a deep sleep fell on Avram. Horror and great darkness came over him. This is a big covenant. Adonai said to Abraham, know this for certain, your descendants will be foreigners in a land that will not be theirs. They will be slaves and be held in oppression for 400 years. That's Passover. But I will judge the nation, the one that makes them slaves, the plagues and wonders. Afterwards, they will leave with many possessions. As for you, you will join your ancestors in peace and be buried in a good old age. Only in the 4th generation will your descendants come back here, because only then will the Emori be ripe for punishment. So we're back to generations again, and we go number 4. The Tetragrammaton. Okay? The seed is going to be 400 years in slavery. There will be redemption. With that will come wealth. And the point of this has something to do with the Amorites. Why does God wait 400 years for the Amorites?
Isn't it an extension of His mercy? Like saying, they've done wrong, I have more than enough rights to obliterate them, but I'm going to give them time and chance.
Okay, so Amorites, what are they famous for?
Slaves.
Eh?
Human trafficking.
No, that's Amalekites. Emori. Emori were found in the land of Canaan. No, okay, some of them had giants, but so did the Philistines.
Idol worship.
Idol worship was kind of plain sense, and what did they use to feed their idols from time to time? Child sacrifice. Nice bunch of people. So I'm going to give them 400 years to wake up and realize what they're doing is wrong.
Prehistoric abortion.
Right, so let's take a look at your life. How many times have you mucked up? How many times have you felt so condemned that God will not even look at you? Is that 400 years of child sacrifice in your corner pocket? No. Listen to me, we don't always understand how far God's grace goes. We don't always understand why the people that seem to be the meanest live the longest. It's because God gives them that much time, because they need that much time so that He can get them home. It makes no sense to us because we want judgment. They hurt people, they break people down. Father, how long will you let this go on? He said, I created that one too, and I'm trying to get it to see light. So when people hurt you, when people have kicked you when you're down, when people have broken you down, understand that God is trying to save them as much as He's trying to save you. If your one child punches your other child in the face, you love them both. You're just more disappointed with the one. But when the other child gets punched in the face, how long will you leave them unpunished? How long will you let them live here? How long will you tolerate their insubordination? How long? And you as a parent have to try and look to them and say, I love that kid too, he's just not in a good space. Except God's got an eternal mindset, and He's got a heck of a lot of children. Guys, not that one would be lost. Wasn't that Yeshua's prayer? Is that yours? When they persecute you, you are blessed. The lights have been switched on. So He gives them this, and He gives them this whole promise. And just as at verse 17, as the sun had set, there was a thick darkness, a smoking fire pot, and a flaming torch that appeared, which passed between these animal parts. That day Adonai made a covenant with Abraham.
Interesting. When he was waltzing around with the Jews about to cross the Red Sea, there was a pillar of fire.
Right? When did Abraham walk through the blood?
He didn't.
He didn't. So how could God make a covenant with Abraham if Abraham never accepted the covenant?
He did it alone.
He took all the conditions determined on Himself.
Right. Is there stipulations to this covenant? When his descendants or Abraham muck up, what is going to happen to them? What should happen? They should be cut in half and be made like these animals. Blood will run. Who's going to take the beating when they do? The second light, Yeshua. God walks through. Yeshua walked afterwards. When they get it wrong, you send it here. And this is why you understand that he had to be flogged, he had to be beaten, and he had to be pierced. He says it here. When mankind gets it wrong, I'll be waiting.
Sorry, Vince, what is 18 again?
New creation.
Can I just ask a question?
Sure.
If you go back where you said we must count the animals, so we come to 5 animals, which you say is Torah.
Yeah.
But only 3 of the animals were cut in half, so that's 6. Then you add 2 that weren't cut in half, that gets you to 8. So could
Also.
new creation also come in with that?
Absolutely. You can bring it in, but it's more evident when you look at the next part of the covenant in 17. No, I'm glad you brought it up. I'm glad you brought it up. You've got to have it in the back of your mind because it's linking from Noah to here. The agenda hasn't changed. Okay? But when we look at 17, you're going to see it in its fullness. Alright? That'll be next week, so. Okay? I will have given this land to the descendants from the Wadi of Egypt to the great river, the Euphrates River, the territory of the Kinani, the Kenazi, the Kidomi, the Hitti, the Perizi, and the Rephaim, the Emori, the Kinani, and the Girgashi, and the Yevusi. That's a lot of people and a lot of space, and Israel today still does not run up to the Euphrates River.
Yeah, isn't the Raphaim from the Nephilim?
No, that was generally referred to them as the Anakim, giants. Okay. Some of them will have a translation when they say it's part of, but it generally comes back to Anakim. All right. So what you have here is, again, this is going to be now the territory. So you get your borders defined. And in this, something was cut, the covenant is being established. Only in 17 are we going to see Abraham's side of things and the lineage of the seed thereafter. Okay? So what I want you to go do for next week, I want you to focus on 17, and I want you then to go to Isaac, because the covenant with Isaac is basically reiterated in a verse. Jacob's covenant, same thing as in a verse, because this covenant here is the baseline for the covenant of Isaac and Jacob. Okay? You guys all good? Alright, and then we'll just tie up the Noah's covenant and that next week. Alright, prayer time is happy time.